Hey, Made in America listeners. Whether this is your first show or you've been with us for 5 years, thank you so much for joining us. Please spread the word about what we're doing and the great things that are happening in manufacturing with somebody you know. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, we're with Aneesa Muthana, CEO of Pioneer Service and M&M Grinding. Aneesa, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to our conversation. We got a lot of cool and interesting stuff to cover, but it's the Made in America podcast, Aneesa. So we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So we make parts. As far as Pioneer Service, we are a Swiss machine shop contract manufacturer. So our parts go into components like aerospace, medical devices. During COVID, we were making parts for biotech industry and medical devices like ventilators and oxygen equipment. So very, very important industries. And we make parts for aerospace. And again, all different types of industries. We've been making parts for Tesla for 10 years. So really cool parts.
That's nice. And why do you do it?
We do it because it brings meaning to life. Being a maker is very important. And I think that we're the unsung heroes at times because it's a very complicated industry, very fast paced, not for the weak. And so yeah, no, we make things because what we make matters.
We make things because what we make matters. I love that. We got some really interesting things to talk about, and I want to take this conversation at some point into a direction we really haven't covered in terms of your, I think, really cool perspective on DEI and how that's impacted what you've done. We got some really interesting sort of family transitions and some negotiations with some adults in your family that set up some companies for success. We're going to get to those details, but in my
Sure.
preparation for this, I'm going to quote you back to yourself. Because I've heard you in another interview say, if you aren't passionate about manufacturing, get out of manufacturing. And I'd love for you to
Sounds so
kind of,
judgmental.
but I love it. I mean, I think if you want to be great at something, if you
Yeah.
want to make a difference, you got to be passionate about it.
Yeah.
And nothing says passion as much as saying, hey, if you don't love what you're doing, get the heck out of here. So I just be curious, kind of where did that thought process come from? And sort of, I know it from hearing you even say it now, like bubbled up from within you. So can you share with the audience, like, where is that coming from, that idea? If you're not passionate about manufacturing, get out.
So that actually, it wasn't a planned, or I didn't even think twice about saying that. It just came out. And the reason it came out was because there's such a stigma about manufacturing that it's dark, dirty, grimy. And so when people, I, let me go back. When I do outreach, as a manufacturing leader, it's my responsibility to advocate for the industry. And so when I'm doing outreach and I have students coming and visiting, I'm not expecting every student to leave my shop wanting to work in manufacturing. What I'm expecting is that they have a respect for it and they have an understanding and an appreciation for what we do. So those that are not passionate about the industry and maybe even bitter about what happened 30 years ago or whatnot, and when it was dark, dirty, grimy, which I'm very grateful for those that have paved the way. But if you're not going to be passionate about it, then you're giving the wrong signs and you're sending the wrong message to those that don't know about manufacturing. That's what I mean. So get out of the way. Let us let us tell the story. Let us talk about what we do because we are passionate. And if I believe anyone that has been working in the industry and understanding, and this also falls on the responsibility of the employers and the supervisors, making sure that their team understands where those parts are going and what impact are we leaving.
I think that's really a really interesting point to pick up on. That, yes, I mean, one of the cool things about manufacturing, which I've discussed with almost every manufacturer who I spoke to and it's been on the show many times, is the idea that in manufacturing, as opposed to any number of the technology fields or legal or whatever, you get to make something. So you see something, whether it's a bar or a block or some material, turn into something else. But you just touched on something we don't talk about enough, which is you might see dozens, thousands, tens of thousands of little pieces going through some process and going out the door. But if you don't know that that goes into a Tesla or goes into a rocket or ends up in a ventilator, I don't think you're going to have the same passion.
No, absolutely. It's, I heard someone recently talk about how someone was cleaning the hospital floor and he was the janitor, and somebody asked that person, what do you do? He's like, we save lives. And that's how engaged he was about working in the medical industry. I've also seen, like, memes of someone like breaking bricks. And one person's asked, what are you doing? He's like, breaking bricks. The other person says, I'm building a cathedral.
Mm.
And then you see, like, the meme is like, this guy's really strong, and he's like very engaged in his work. So how do you expect to have an engaged team? How do you expect people to love the industry if they don't know the impact that they're making? And that is on the supervisors and the owners. We need to, and the sales department, we quarterly have our quarterly meets, and us managers stand in front of the production team, machines are off, and we discuss what new applications we're serving, what new industries we're serving. And sometimes for the new people that are, on the team, we'll recap and say, this job on machine number 105, remember this part? This goes into ventilators, those goes into aerospace. And giving them the visual. And we at times will call our customers and ask them, if we don't see it on their website, we'll ask them for a picture of the component. Or if the sales team or engineering team go visit the customer and get to take a picture of the component, we add that to the slides, because we know the importance of sending that message to the team and keeping them engaged and happy. Like, I don't want them to just see themselves as a laborer. I want them to see themselves as a maker.
That's like such a powerful thing, right? To feel like you make something. Is that something you had as a kid? Like, that like I can feel your
Yeah.
passion. Is that where it came from? Like, do you remember that?
Yeah. So I was 11 years old when my parents opened up M&M Quality Grinding. And I wanted to run a machine, and I wasn't allowed to. My brothers were running machines. And I was like, having temper tantrums, and I was sanding desks, cleaning out tanks, cleaning the shop floor, filing. I even learned AR and AP before I was able to, like, run a machine. So at age 13, my father gave me the privilege to run a machine. And DCFS was not called, thankfully. So, I'm sure that were laws broken, but this is family time. And I knew my father and my mother. They worked in manufacturing their whole lives. And I think that is what really resonated with me. Not necessarily just working in the manufacturing, but hearing their stories. When things slow down and overtime is cut, I have a meeting. I'm the one that announces that to the team. And I tell them the story about hearing my parents talk about, when their overtime is going to be cut and how they're not going to be able to save, or they're not going to be able to pay the mortgage because overtime was cut. So I'm very sensitive to these types of conversations because I remember it as a child. And my father, the way he treated his shop employees were just as good as he was treating his office employees or his managers. And so it was never like us versus them. Oh, the shop guys. On the contrary, I always refer to them as the backbone of the company. And sometimes my engineers and my salespeople are like, well, what about us? I'm like, you can be the legs, you can be the heart, but they're the backbone.
They keep things on the and so that's another interesting component about the manufacturing business is you have to sort of put together a number of like different people to all work together, right? Because you've got the people that are making, and we talk a lot about that. But to your point, you've got the people that are doing the AR, the AP, that are doing the sales, that are cleaning the building. Those people are important too. How do you think about making it feel like one family as opposed to an us against them?
Team building, anything from taking the team to feed my starving children, to having huddles and including everyone. When I hire a salesperson, they shadow the shop floor, they shadow the people in shipping, they shadow the ship people in grinding. They don't just start at their desk job and not understand all the processes that are involved in making.
You put everyone through the floor to see what's going on?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I
Oh,
bet you
yeah.
get a lot of good feedback on that.
They love it. Everyone loves it. My sales engineer graduated, she was an industrial engineer. She came in and her title is sales engineer. And for the first 2 weeks, she was only on the shop floor. The only thing that she was doing was shadowing and reading work instructions and seeing the work instructions in real time, and then making notes of anything that she sees that wasn't on the work instructions that should be on the work instructions, or something that's on the work instructions that we're actually not doing. So it's a really good way to keep things fresh and make sure things are updated. And I'm not even involved in that anymore. It's my supervisors and managers that understand the expectation. And expecting someone from day one to perform, they have, people typically have orientation. I don't have orientation. I put them through, like, obviously, introduce them to the team, show them. But during the interview process, they pretty much know who Pioneer Service or M&M Quality is, because they've already heard it from everyone that interviewed them. Our core values is given to them on a card, and making sure that they understand that your job description is your job description, but this trumps everything. And
Mhm.
so if you're not aligned with these values, if you're not willing to take the time, whether you're waving to the next time students are visiting, or taking the time to explain what you're doing as far as your job to visitors or your teammates, there's no like tribal knowledge. I'm gonna keep everything close and no one's gonna know. There's none of that. And it's important that it comes from me, and I have to lead by example. I can't expect my team to do that if I'm not doing that.
How frequently do you bring the company together? I know clearly you've got a plan, you're executing a passion to bring them together. I mean, are you doing huddles company wide? Like how are you bringing them together?
Yeah, so each departments have their huddles, like quality production and engineering have their morning huddle. And then everyone has their one-on-ones with whoever they're working with on projects, or if they're working closely together, I encourage one-on-ones, because I feel like sometimes these tedious emails going back and forth on things, and, print it out, flag it, and then in your one-on-one, address it, or have it a bullet in the huddles. So those are the types of conversations that we talk through.
Mhm.
Sometimes emails can land differently than you intend. And so I'm not anti-email, but I feel like that human interaction is so important.
Yeah, it's a tool. Email is a tool in the toolbox, but it does
Yeah.
not replace back and forth
Yeah.
conversation.
So like July 11th, we have our quarterly meet, and that's going to be for our third quarter.
Mhm.
And then, or our second quarter ending, beginning of third quarter. And then we're also going to have, like, in August, I can't remember the date, like a picnic for all of the employees and their families to come and break bread. It's not mandatory. I know some people just don't want to do that, and that's okay. You see these people every day. You don't want to see them on your weekends. But if they want to, sometimes it's anything from going to Six Flags to the zoo to a picnic. Once we rented, or a few years, we rented a boat, and we were like all with our families, and it's really fun. It's time to break the bread. And I like meeting, especially the newer employees or the employees that have children, and seeing them grow up. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's a way to interact without the pressures of our day to day.
Yeah, I think it gets somebody out of sort of the context of the day to day, and you kind of see them. Not that you don't see them as a person at work, but you see them in a different context. Maybe learn a different light and build a bridge and a relationship that's just good to have and feel good about, but maybe also gets leveraged at work too.
Yes, absolutely.
And you've spent a lot of time. You've talked about sort of evangelizing about manufacturing. This idea of finding other makers and helping do that. Is that just about growing your business? Is it about finding other people and inspiring them to join the cause? Like, what, I mean, it's a lot of time you could be doing other things. Why is that something you do?
Um, So I sit on a lot of boards, and I meet with a lot of makers, and sometimes we're all facing, like I'm on the National Association of Manufacturing. I'm also, I was part of the PMPA, Precision Machining Products Association. So these are national boards, right? And you're meeting with guys that are either much smaller than you or much bigger than you, and they're facing the same issues. And so learning best practices and learning what worked for them, what didn't work for them, that's just good business. And it's also on the flip side, in the last, I would say, since 2012, I made it outreach is part of our core values. I made it part of my day to day. Whether it's sitting on a board, whether it's speaking, whether it's interning. I have interns. I have 5 interns during the summer. I have, apprenticeship programs. I just feel like it's time to give back. If the industry has been my livelihood my whole life, and I'm unwilling to give back to that industry, shame on me. I need to do more of that, and I love it. Once you get a taste of it, I feel like many people are like, I don't want to share my secret sauce. No one's asking for your secret sauce. It's just go and rub shoulders with the best of the best, and tell your secrets, tell you what the struggles that you're facing. Some of these people genuinely care. I have competitors of the PMPA. During COVID, many of us were making parts for ventilators. And one of my colleagues had his machine down because he didn't have a gauge. You had 4 people next day air him the gauge on their expense. They didn't even ask him, and he the next day comes back and says, okay, guys, I got the gauges. Don't send any more, and nobody even replied back and said, yeah, I'm sending you a gauge. Some of them just sent it for the sake of sending it because they didn't want his machine down. And, obviously this was very important. It was during COVID, but this is very common. I remember personally asking for a gauge, and one of my competitors who's on the other side of town sent their quality manager because his drive was closer to my shop to drop it off. And I've done the same. So it's that camaraderie, it's that respect, it's that, again, not giving your secret sauce, but giving, the support. Wouldn't you rather your competitor have the job than in going overseas? So it's just really being strategic and kind in the industry. And I feel like so many people are aligned that way. It's just that we don't hear about them all the time.
So yeah, someone I really respect and learned a lot from in my career, I always said, givers gain. And I just feel like there's too many times people think they should be insular and insulated and protectionist. And it's just never the way to go. And you gain so much more, I think, by giving. And it seems like that's what you've seen. And these trade associations, NMA, PMPA, TMA, those are great opportunities to meet other people and sort of like find your tribe, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? And not every association is going to be a fit. It's really just finding who, and it's meeting people and being able to bring your guard down. And there's so much violence and there's so much hate in the world. Why wouldn't we volunteer? Why wouldn't we help each other? Why wouldn't we make this world a little bit better? It's not just about making money and making parts. It's about creating a legacy. And I don't believe that there's any good legacy without giving. So, of course, that's part of whether it's an association, whether it's your local food bank, whether it's on an international level, whatever drives you, find it. And sometimes many of us don't know what that is until we're exposed to it.
Yeah, you got to get out there and try. And
Yeah.
a lot of times people say giving starts at home. And I think that kind of pivots me to thinking about sort of your story of moving sort of from in the business to owning the business. And it's
Yep.
really unique. I've never heard anything like it. And I wonder if you could just kind of walk us through. You gave us 11 to 13.
Yeah.
Now we'll take 13 to the
So
rest of the way.
54.
Yeah, there you go.
So at age 23, I found myself, being second guessed. A lot of our employees and some of the people inside our company and outside our company were just like, princess, daddy's little girl, where's your brother? And it was just like, and my family was working way too hard to, make sure that I felt like I belonged in my own family business. And so, and that's, I think many, second, third generations in businesses feel that way, whether it's because they're a girl, whether it's because, you just can't get out of that little cliche that you're daddy's son, daddy's daughter. So I felt like, what, this is not going to work for me. And age 23, as a single mom, I left the family business, and my plan B was, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And so my uncle had already pioneer service for a couple of years, and his goal was to compete with my dad in the grinding industry. And I love my uncle dearly. And so he wanted me to join Pioneer. And so I had one condition, and he was like, whatever. I'm like, you need to be my silent partner. And he's like, sure. He's like, where's the downside to that? So you're going to do all the work? Yep. You're going to be accountable? Yes, sir. And him and I used to run machines together. So he used to work for my father. And so my goal was two things. The intentions were like, I didn't want anyone second guessing me. And I knew being an older male, people were going to go to him. And the other, and I didn't want that same family dynamics I had at my dad's place. And then the other one was that I didn't want to compete with my family. I wanted to find my own place. And I was talking to companies like Pioneer when I worked at M&M. So I understood the processes. I wasn't by any means a machinist, but I kind of got what they were doing. And so back then it was old, dark, grimy. It was back in the early 90s. Started on the shop floor learning it, and that's where I built it. And then we became completely Swiss, and got rid of all our old equipment. And machining is where we stood. We do grinding like my dad's place, but we don't compete with them. We do our own bar grinding, and then we do piece part grinding, which they don't do. And so it was never like a conflict of interest or anybody feeling like I took their secrets and started another business and competed with them. Fast forward to 2021, after 29 years leaving the family business, my father was ready to retire, and my brothers couldn't afford to buy him out. So they thought maybe they need to get an outsider, and that's not what they wanted. So they asked me to come back to the family business. I at first said,
The prodigal daughter returns.
So at first I was like, no way am I coming back. And I used to say to my brothers, I will learn how to say, do you want fries with that before I come back? That was how adamant I was, like, I am not coming back. So so they're like, whatever you want, like, tell us what you want to come back. And I said, I told my mom, I'm like, I'm gonna give you the same condition I gave your brother 29 years ago. You guys have to be my silent partners because I don't want family drama and I don't want anyone second guessing me. And I will do all the work. We'll figure it out. And my mom's like, just like my uncle said, where's the downside to that? And so she's like, I've been jealous of my brother all these years. It's about time you come back. So thankfully it worked out, and I actually moved both companies to Hodgkins and to 132,000 square feet. So M&M has 70,000 square feet and devising wall, so they're separate entities, and Pioneer has 62,000 square feet. And we're expanding both companies. We're automating. We're doing really cool stuff. And I'm so blessed to have the teams I have today. I'm only as good as my team. And so that's the dynamics, and that's the story.
3 years old,
Yeah.
single mom. So you have distractions, and you've got a lot of responsibility on your plate. Your uncle's starting this new business. He's made an investment. He's put everything on the line, or at least something on the line, to make it happen. And you convince him to basically turn over the keys to you to run it. How does that conversation go? I mean, there's got to be questions. I just can't imagine he goes like, oh, sounds good, send me a check, and throws you the keys.
So he had a lot of trust in me. And my uncle was in my ear while I was still at M&M. And I didn't leave M&M for Pioneer. I left because I was pretty much done. But I knew my uncle was an option. I just didn't really want it to be an option because I didn't want to compete with my family. And I didn't think that would be something he would be willing to do. After we had one conversation, and I told him, I said, I don't want to look back at what I'm doing and ever have regrets. I want to be able to see my parents and appreciate everything that they've done for me and not feel like I betrayed them. And he understood. It wasn't like he was this vindictive person that wants to get my dad, but that was just a skill set that he had. And the only skill set that he had was grinding. He didn't know machining. And so that was his passion. And so he understood my take on it, and me taking responsibility was all he needed. Like me, and he knew we worked together. He knew, even as a little girl, he remembered, like, we used to always, it's so funny because back in the late 80s, when cell phones just came out, him and I used to work the second shift. We used to leave work like at 7 or 8 to go home, and it was just me and him. And I remember one time at a toll booth seeing this red convertible and this huge cell phone. And this woman had this huge cell phone out, and we're like in this beat up van, like company van. It's like we don't even know if we're going to get home safely at this point because it was so bad. And it was those humble beginnings. Let me tell you, that's everything. I wish I can go back to that little girl in that van and just say, "You've got this."
It's,
Um, so
but it's so funny. Like, so I'll just pivot because I don't want to lose the thread, but
yeah,
you said something that I think, people that have been through it get it, which is sometimes like going through the struggle and striving to make a difference, and like those hard times when you were like kind of like just scraping it together and throwing some duct tape on something and just making it work. Those were like really,
yeah.
really fun in hindsight.
That's unreplaceable. There are moments that you can't. And honestly, as parents, where our faults are, and as grandparents, is that we don't allow our kids to go through that. We want to protect them from that. And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that with my children. I'm guilty of that with my grandchildren. It's like, let them have a backbone. Let's stay away. Keep your distance. Don't fix it for them. And it's like it's hard. And I know that some parents have figured out, but it's really hard not to protect your kid from what you went through. And so, but looking back at my life, I would never want my parents to protect me from that. And at the time, probably I would have wanted, it's just those moments I have, I'm going to go way off topic, but it's a story I've never really told. And it's so worth telling. I was 17 and pregnant with my first son, and I was working for the family business. I almost miscarried, and my mother was out of town, and I was like calling my doctor, and he said, "You need to come to your doctor. You need to come to the hospital." So I had like no form of transportation, and my husband wasn't going to miss work. So he went off, and I called my Uncle Omar, my partner. And so I called him, and he took me to the hospital. We were there the whole day, and I didn't really have good insurance. So like our appointment, like instead of being a couple of hours, we were there from like 8 a.m. to like 4 p.m. Did not eat, had ultrasounds, had all these tests. He was taking me home. On the way home, he asked if I was hungry. And I'm like, no. It's like I was too shy to say yeah. And he's like, of course you're hungry. So he stopped at Burger King. I didn't know at age 17 that Burger King had double Whoppers, like 2 slices of beef. I didn't know that was a thing. And I didn't know that you could actually order French fries and onion rings. And so my uncle ordered French fries and onion rings and a double Whopper and a strawberry shake. I lived on the third floor. I would stop at every floor where you can't see me. It's like on the side. And I would take a couple of bites of fries, an onion ring, and a gulp of the strawberry shake. I will never, ever forget my uncle's kindness. And to this day, so when in my 20s, when we became partners and I became successful, successful enough to go to a restaurant. So to this day, my uncle and I will go out to eat, and he will never pay the bill. And every time the bill comes, I look at him, double Whopper. That's all I say. And he's like, man, if I knew, I would have gotten you 2 double Whoppers. It's like that. And like, okay, like how many people, I can't even imagine eating a double Whopper today. I wouldn't even want it. Like, but at age 17, pregnant, craving things I didn't even know I craved. And having that moment with my uncle, like I've paid it. He paid it forward, and I paid him tenfold over and over and over, but only because he nourished me, only because he gave me the opportunity. We wouldn't have the relationship we have today if not for his kindness and for his generosity. And so whenever, obviously sheltering your kids and, helping them, letting them obviously go through enough struggle, but also recognizing where and when to be that advocate, to being supporting them in ways that maybe they need. So that double Whopper did a whole lot for me.
It did. It's amazing. Like clearly there's a deep, deep relationship there. He obviously is a connection with you and sees something in you, even something you didn't see in yourself. And I think you just hit on something so special. I would say 2 things that I'm kind of walking away with. One is to the point you made. Sometimes you do need to step in, right? So it's not just about letting everyone fail all the time. Every once in a while, when you see them making a wrong decision that's really bad, and you can do a little something to point them in the right direction, those things can pay off. You said tenfold. I might go 10,000 fold.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is how much a small kindness, small in terms of the amount of energy, effort, and money it took to do it small, but how much a small kindness can actually turn out to be a huge life-changing a thing. And look, here we are today. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we're all capable of doing that on so many different levels. Like I know, like when I'm part of associations, sometimes you have a conversation with someone, you don't think anything of it. And then years later, it's like, thank you for that advice, or thank you for taking the time. I'm like, I don't even remember you, dude. Like I don't remember having that conversation. And it's not that they're not meaningful. It's not that I'm 54 and I forget. It's just so, but once upon a time, when whether it's like someone within your company or outside your company, you never know. And I know that another way that I also have reaped the benefits is like internships.
Mhm.
Back 20 years ago, a gentleman interned for me at age 16. He is now my CPA, and now he's my mentor. So you just never know. Like he gives me service that no CPA is going to give me, because of that, because of what I've done for him. And at that time, did I even think like, hey, 20 years from now, he's going to graduate, he's going to, he's going to be successful, and I'm going to hire him as my CPA? Absolutely not. Never would have thought about that. But you just never know. You plant the seeds and you get it somehow, somewhere.
In the end, givers gain. And that I do want to bring up a big and very important topic, which will take us some time, even though we're going to be out of
Yeah.
time. But we're going to push through.
Okay.
Is you have, I think, a really unique background. We've touched on it. I mean, obviously, you look different than many Americans. You dress a little bit different.
What are you
You've
talking
got
about?
Yeah, what am I talking about? You obviously had single mother, a mother early, so you've had a lot of different things. And when people find out and hear, including when I first heard that you speak publicly about DEI, everyone, I think, probably just as they've done in many other different ways, puts you in a box and thinks, oh, I know what that's going to be about. But in fact, I think you zig when other people think you're going to zag. And I wonder if you could maybe share with the audience your perspective, because it's a perspective you and I both share, different backgrounds, different reasons, similar experiences. And I wonder if you
Yeah.
might share.
Well, everyone knows DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I wrote an article for Modern Machine Shop, and it's kind of also framed around my talk. And that's the ROI of DEI. So first and foremost, we know different perspectives, different ideas bring value. That's how innovation is championed. Innovation is my thing. Innovation is championed through diversity. So understanding the ROI and understanding that you're getting a bigger pool of candidates when you're looking for your team, and you're not, excluding yourself from others. So having that open mind and understanding of the value of having a diverse team, that is very important. Now, that being said, I sat on a lot of boards, and typically I'm the only woman, I'm the only brown person, I'm sure this only hijabi in the room. And it is what it is. And so now when I'm sitting in these boardrooms and we're talking about DEI, and throughout the years, and my white colleagues like cringe and they get uncomfortable, and like, what's the problem? And so I realize that they don't feel comfortable, and they've have mentioned it to me as well. They don't feel comfortable talking about DEI because if they have a difference of opinion, then they're obviously against DEI. If they have, whatever their input is, if it's not just yes, ma'am, yes, that's correct, then they're labeled the bad guy, and they don't want that, and they become very nervous. And so in my, thinking, I'm like, okay, when we talk about DEI, we only talk about it from one perspective. We only talk about it about like the sense of belonging. Every woman deserves that sense of belonging. Every brown person deserves that sense of belonging, whatever the background, whatever the diversity, check off the boxes. We deserve, that sense of belonging. So first and foremost, DEI should never, even unfortunately, it is a political game and it is a check off a box for many, but that's not what DEI is. DEI is bringing value and having a different perspective than maybe someone else on the team. And that's what that means. And everyone, the inclusion is required for everyone. So for me to feel that I belong, my male colleagues, my white colleagues shouldn't feel like they don't belong at my expense. And so, or at their expense, I shouldn't feel like I belong at their expense. And so excluding a race or excluding a gender, calling it advocacy is not advocacy, it's hypocrisy. And I talk about that often because I feel like it's a responsibility to talk about that, because that's something that not many people that look like you can talk about. And when I, looking like who I am, talk about it, I at times been called a sellout or been called, oh, you've just blended in. And at one point, even my male colleagues are like, is there a white guy in you? Because you talk like a white guy. And I'm like, no, I just appreciate those who paved the way. And my brown mother paved the way for me. My brown father paved the way for me, but so did the old white guys. And so to exclude them from the recognition that they deserve, and when it was dark, dirty, and grimy, most people didn't want to be in manufacturing, and not to recognize that we didn't just end up here. Someone had to come into work every morning, dig through the bad, ugly stuff, figure things out. The innovation just didn't happen overnight, and that's also something that we also have to take a step back and say, okay, is my empowering, is that dividing? My hashtag for speaking about DEI is empowering without dividing, because that should never be the intent. If you're trying to empower one race or one gender at the expense of someone else, that's dividing. And dividing is not advocacy.
That's exactly it's so fun. It's just wonderful to hear you say it. I mean, I completely agree, and it's something that you and I certainly bonded on pre-show. And I think for some people only listen, and I don't know if they know what a hijabi is, but someone who
Yeah.
wears a hijab, so it's sort of a head covering.
Of Muslim faith.
Yeah, a Muslim faith head cover.
Yeah.
Yep, correct. And you're not hiding it, right? I mean, it's out there. And I think, one of the things that you touched on there, which I think is, well, you didn't touch on it directly, but I'll frame it up, which is sometimes I think we view the past in today's lens. And instead of, to the point you're making, when manufacturing was dark, dirty, dingy, dangerous, that period of time, maybe in addition to being dark, dirty, dingy, dangerous, was dominated by white men. Maybe women and other people of color were excluded, and all those different things were true. But that doesn't mean everything was bad. And we can't judge the 1850s or the 1950s or the 1980s by 2024 standards. And to your point, if we claim diversity by exclusion, we're just creating another problem with a different name.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that, recognizing that and knowing that people are ignorant, I think I mentioned to you on the call, like my first board meeting with one of the associations, I walked in and they asked if I needed a translator. And I don't know, did I mention that to you? Maybe not. Okay.
You did, but you could tell the story because no one else listening to this was on that call.
So I've talked about this a few times, and it's like, if again, manufacturing is not for the faint of the heart. Like you got to have thick skin. And so it could have been ignorance. It could have been arrogance. He could have wanted me not to feel like I belonged. I could have read a million things in his intentions. What I chose to do is like not question his intentions and not allow him to push my buttons. And so it goes both ways. It's like, I know I'm not naive. I know people don't think I belong in that boardroom. I know people don't think I believe in this industry at times. Do I care? Even a little, because there's enough that do respect me, and respect is earned. It's not given, whether I'm a white guy, whether I'm a woman. Obviously, being a white guy, you have your ins, you have the people that are maybe more accepting to you. But do I know all the adversities that every white guy has faced in his life and say, well, he hasn't, and I'm the only one? That's a victim mindset. And if we start having those victim mindset mentalities, it's just it's a waste of energy and a waste of time. So I try so hard to run my company and to live my life in a positive way, and eliminating toxic people, whether they're employees. I had times that, many employers do this. They let go people with the best skill sets, but the worst character. And so I do that in my personal life. I do that when I'm in, choosing associations to serve. And I do that when I'm running my company. And so you just have to filter through where you want to be. And if you feel like someone's not being appreciative, whether it's your employer, whether it's an association, find your plan B. This is America, the land of opportunity. Like, there's no reason why we're going to starve, and it's like and if someone doesn't appreciate you, find someone that does, whether it's your husband or your employer. Like, just,
Or your kids, if you got to go there. Exactly.
Yeah, you said it. I didn't.
Do you find that as you move forward, that you're seeing more and more people embracing that message? Because you touched on it briefly, and you could touch on it more as much as you like, that some people call you a sellout. I can totally see that happening. And people not feeling like, people feeling like you should be saying something different. I'd just be curious, to the extent you feel comfortable talking about it, like, is there more acceptance? And we've talked about what you do in the face of someone who asks if you need a translator, or says you don't belong. What do you do in the face of somebody who you think would be a DEI ally, but says you're not DEI enough or whatever?
Yeah, no, well, that's hypocrisy. I don't associate with those people. I've been asked to speak at events that I have declined because I know the message and I know what they want me to say. And I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue. Like, if I feel like I'm going to bring value on that stage, I will bring value on that stage. If I feel like I'm going to be second guessed, I recently did a speaking event, and so I was asked if I needed a security guard. And I was like, well, why? They're like, well, what's going on in the world? I'm like, I know, it's so sad. I'm like, but why would I need a security guard? They're like, well, there are people that, I'm like, there are? Like, I'm not naive to it. I know that there are, but I'm like, no, I don't need a security guard. And no, I'm not going to, like, I'm going to come to this event and I'm going to feel comfortable coming to this event because though the audience, the majority of the audience is going to be aligned with what I'm saying. And if they're not, I have the mic. What are gonna, what are they gonna say?
I'm in control.
I'll handle it. And I'm like, but if it's physical, please, please
Step
get in there, get in there. But it was just like, it's sad. It's so sad that that was even a thought. And again, it's not that I'm naive to it, but I'm not going to spend my energy and my time on something that I don't even want to acknowledge. I don't want to be part of. So whether they're calling me a sellout, whether they're, against who I am and my faith, that's their business. That's none of my business. Let them believe what they want to believe. That's just too much energy for me to spend on. And then you see people, like ignorant people at times, that don't understand. I've had people, in associations, I've never met a Muslim. I didn't know our values are so aligned. When we're making decisions in boardrooms, and I'm making decisions and I'm leading those decisions, and they're decisions to the best interest of the members and the association, and them knowing that I'm a person of my faith, of course that's going to send a different message than Fox News or whatever else they, gave them the message of who the people that look like me are. Am I going to be like a puppet and have to constantly convince people who I am? No, I'm not going to do that either. But I'm going to lead by example, and my faith is my foundation. It is my compass. And when people know the decisions I make, when I give customers money back because they put the wrong price on their PO, and we were in a meeting not even a week ago, had a call with a new customer. It was a $44,000 mistake. And my team they knew we were going to correct it. They weren't even thinking twice about, should we not even mention it? And our customers, like, his face, like, totally turned white. He's like, we did what? And they were like, yeah, you put the wrong price on the PO. And they know that that's part of our values. And they know that those values are aligned to my personal Islamic values. And for those that don't feel comfortable hearing that, that's not my problem.
Not your problem at all. And I'm going to leave it right there. That was terrific. Aneesa, it's been great chatting with you. I have a few three wrap up questions that I like to ask. So I'll get those to you and then we'll button it up. First question is, do you have a favorite business book?
So we talk about engagement of the team. So I would say Start with Why by Simon Sinek. I feel like that book is his videos, his book. I listen to my books on my ride to work or on airplane rides, but overall, I feel like anything that is about teamwork is very essential as being a leader in this industry.
Yeah, his Start with Why and the other one, Infinite Game, are both really
Yeah,
books.
that one's good too.
Good recommendations. What's something, Aneesa, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
There's no shortcuts. You have to work hard. There's, especially in the position that I'm in. If I want to be just an employee and I want work-life balance, this isn't for me. And so making those decisions and not feeling guilty about them, because for many years I felt guilty. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to travel the world, to, spend on my family like I wouldn't be able to spend if I was, an employee versus an owner. But at the same time, many sacrifices, whether it's financial or time, you can't get that back. So be mindful of those decisions, whether that's for you or not.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What's something that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you went back and told young Aneesa, now you've started your career the earliest of anyone we've spoken to, so you don't have to go necessarily back to 11-year-old
Yeah.
Aneesa. You could go to, something a little older than that. But what would you tell young Aneesa that you've learned later in your life that you think would really, really help her?
It's okay for everyone not to like you. It's okay for you to have uncomfortable conversations and you'll survive. You'll be okay.
I absolutely love it. Aneesa, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I love your life story, your unique perspective. It has really been my pleasure having you on.
It's been a pleasure as well. And I really love your shows and I can't wait to see mine on yours.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.